$40 billion of federal dollars to do whatever he has in mind. Yeah. Why would
Mel Gibson, the renowned Hollywood icon and filmmaker, has once again unleashed a scathing critique of California Governor Gavin Newsom, delivering a fiery condemnation of his leadership and policies. In a recent press conference, Gibson pulled no punches, targeting Newsom's governance with sharp precision and highlighting what he perceives as catastrophic failures. His remarks were not just a critique, but a blistering takedown, accusing Newsom of driving California into economic and social decline through mismanagement, excessive taxation, and overregulation. Gibson's passionate delivery resonated with many who share his frustrations, and his comments have sparked renewed discussion about Newsom's leadership and his broader political ambitions, particularly as he eyes a potential presidential run in 2028. Gibson's primary grievance centers on Newsom's handling of California's economy and its once thriving industries, particularly Hollywood. He argued that the state, historically the epicenter of the global film industry, has become an inhospitable environment for filmmakers due to Newsom's policies. Skyrocketing taxes, burdensome regulations, and an exorbitant cost of living have driven studios and productions out of California, with many opting for more cost-effective locations in other states or even overseas. Gibson illustrated this point with a striking anecdote. It was cheaper for him to fly an entire film crew to Bulgaria, cover their accommodations and meals for 3 days, shoot the necessary footage, and return, than to film for a single day in Los Angeles. This example underscores the financial strain that Newsom's policies have placed on the film industry, once a cornerstone of California's economy. The exodus of Hollywood productions is not an isolated phenomenon. Major films and television shows, such as Oppenheimer and The Last of Us, have increasingly been filmed outside California, taking jobs, talent, and economic opportunities with them. Gibson pointed to this trend as evidence of Newsom's failure to maintain the state's competitive edge. The numbers support his claims. California's share of film and television production has steadily declined as other regions offer more attractive incentives, lower costs, and streamlined logistics. This shift has had a ripple effect, impacting not only filmmakers but also the countless ancillary businesses that rely on the industry, from catering to equipment rentals. In response to this backlash, Newsom has attempted to address the crisis by bolstering California's film and television tax credit program, increasing its funding from $330 million to $750 million and making the credits refundable for the first time. These changes were intended to lure productions back to the state, but Gibson and other industry insiders argue that the measures are too little, too late. The damage has been done, and California's reputation as the premier destination for filmmaking has been tarnished. Productions have already established pipelines in other states and countries, and many are unlikely to return, even with enhanced incentives. This belated effort only reinforces the perception that Newsom's leadership is reactive rather than proactive, more focused on optics than substantive solutions. Beyond the film industry, Gibson's critique extended to Newsom's broader governance, which he described as a disaster marked by rampant crime, acute homelessness, and crippling inflation. He argued that Newsom's policies have made it nearly impossible for businesses to thrive, driving many to relocate to states with more favorable economic conditions. The tech industry, another pillar of California's economy, has also seen significant departures, with major companies moving operations to places like Texas and Nevada. This mass exodus of businesses and residents has eroded California's economic base, leaving behind a state struggling to maintain its status as a hub of innovation and prosperity. Gibson's rhetoric was particularly pointed when addressing Newsom's handling of crises like homelessness and wildfires. He sarcastically referred to Newsom's "Build Back Better" rhetoric, a phrase popularized during the Biden administration, as an empty promise. The governor's pledges to revitalize communities devastated by wildfires, such as those in Maui, have fallen flat. Despite grand promises and significant federal funding, Newsom's administration delivered only a handful of homes to displaced residents, leaving many in makeshift shelters with little hope of recovery. Gibson used this example to highlight what he sees as Newsom's hallmark, performative leadership that prioritizes media appearances over tangible results. The Chairman Maui Plan, as Gibson mockingly dubbed it, has become a symbol of Newsom's inability to deliver on his commitments. The actor-turned-director also took aim at Newsom's political ambitions, particularly his apparent desire to position himself as a presidential contender in 2028. Gibson argued that Newsom's track record makes him an unlikely candidate to win over a national electorate. His approval ratings in California are abysmal, with recent polls showing significant dissatisfaction among voters. This was evident in the overwhelming rejection of Proposition 36, a crime and bail reform measure that Newsom opposed, which 70% of Californians supported. This disconnect between Newsom and the electorate underscores his limited appeal, even within his home state. Gibson suggested that Newsom's focus on curating a polished public image, complete with a new podcast aimed at engaging with critics and supporters alike, is a distraction from the urgent issues facing California. The podcast, which Newsom launched with much fanfare, was intended to showcase his willingness to engage with diverse perspectives, including those of his political opponents. However, Gibson and others view it as a thinly veiled attempt to rebrand himself as a centrist figure capable of appealing to a broader audience, including MAGA supporters. Critics argue that the podcast is less about genuine dialogue and more about scoring political points and generating viral moments to boost Newsom's personal brand. Rather than addressing California's crumbling infrastructure, skyrocketing homelessness, or out-of-control crime, Newsom appears preoccupied with crafting a narrative that positions him as a viable national leader. This focus on image over substance has only deepened skepticism about his leadership. Gibson's critique also extended to Newsom's ally, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, whom he accused of deflecting blame for the city's failures onto others. He pointed to the Palisades fire disaster as a prime example of their combined negligence. Both Newsom and Bass, he argued, failed to adequately fund and equip the state's fire department, leaving it unprepared to handle escalating wildfire risks. In a particularly egregious oversight, fire hydrants that could have helped contain the blaze were left unfilled, exacerbating the destruction. Rather than taking responsibility, Bass shifted the blame to Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, who had publicly highlighted the department's lack of resources. Gibson described this as a despicable act of political scapegoating, further evidence of the leadership vacuum in California's government. The call for a federal investigation into Newsom's handling of funds, particularly his request for $40 billion in federal dollars, was another focal point of Gibson's tirade. He questioned why anyone would trust Newsom with such a massive sum given his track record of mismanagement. The phrase "Build Back Better" was again invoked as a hollow slogan, with Gibson challenging anyone to point to a single instance where the government, under Newsom's leadership, had successfully delivered on such promises. He argued that any federal funding should come with stringent oversight to ensure it is not squandered on ineffective initiatives or political posturing. Gibson's broader critique of Newsom's leadership style painted him as a quintessential career politician, polished, media-savvy, and adept at delivering soundbites, but ultimately lacking in substance. While Newsom projects an image of progress and compassion, the reality on the ground tells a different story. Homelessness has surged, with encampments becoming a visible fixture in cities across the state. Crime rates have climbed, fueled by policies that critics argue prioritize leniency over accountability. The affordability crisis has driven middle-class families and businesses out of California, leaving behind a state increasingly divided between the ultra-wealthy and those struggling to survive. The actor also took issue with Newsom's alignment with the broader Democratic Party's reliance on identity politics, which he believes has alienated voters. He argued that Democrats, including Newsom, are out of touch with the broader electorate, focusing on divisive rhetoric rather than practical solutions. This disconnect was evident in the 2024 election, where the party suffered significant losses due to its embrace of hyper-woke policies that failed to resonate with everyday Americans. Gibson suggested that Newsom's podcast, while potentially a step toward engaging with critics, is unlikely to succeed unless he demonstrates genuine curiosity, humility, and authenticity, qualities he believes Newsom lacks. The reference to Newsom's podcast also sparked a discussion about his priorities. At a time when California is grappling with multiple crises, from wildfires to homelessness to economic decline, the decision to launch a media venture struck many as tone-deaf. Critics, including Gibson, argue that Newsom's focus on building his personal brand, whether through podcasts or carefully staged public appearances, reflects a broader pattern of prioritizing optics over governance. The podcast, billed as a platform for open dialogue, is seen by skeptics as a calculated move to rehabilitate Newsom's image ahead of a potential presidential run, rather than a sincere effort to address California's challenges. Gibson's call for a political purge of Newsom and base reflects a growing sentiment among Californians who feel betrayed by their leaders. The state's decline, once unimaginable given its history of prosperity and innovation, has become a cautionary tale of what happens when ideology trumps competence. Newsom's policies, from high taxes to lax crime measures, have fueled a sense of disillusionment, with many residents and businesses voting with their feet by leaving the state. The rejection of Proposition 36 was a clear rebuke of Newsom's approach, signaling that even his base is growing weary of his leadership.